Molungyimsen, History of the First Christian Village in Nagaland. Nagaland is a mountainous state in northeast India which shares a border with Myanmar to the east and the Indian state of Assam to the west. And it is from Assam that the first American Baptist missionaries set out to share the gospel with the inhabitants of the Naga Hills. Reverend Dr. Edward Winter Clark, along with the first Naga Christians, founded the village of Molungyimsen on the 24th of October, 1876. Thus, Molungyimsen became the first Christian village in Nagaland, which is today one of the few predominantly Christian states in India. It was from this village that Christianity spread throughout the rest of Nagaland, making it the Christian majority state it now is. Dr. Edward Winter Clark and his wife Mary Mead Clark moved from Amenia, New York, to Sibsakar, Assam, upon hearing the call of the Lord to the mission field. They arrived Sibsakar in March 1869, where Dr. Clark was appointed to take charge of the Assam Baptist Mission Press. At the time, Sibsakar was the mission center of the American Baptist Foreign Mission Society and was an important focal point of mission operations in the region. It was during their time here that the Clarks first came into contact with the Nagas from the hills, who used to come to the plains of Assam for trade. The Nagas were the inhabitants of the hill country who lived in the villages on the mountain crests and were constantly at war with each other over the taking of heads as trophies, which was considered a social honor and glory. Of these strange and warlike people, Dr. Clark wrote in 1871, "Tribe upon tribe of Nagas are accessible to the gospel. It is certainly painful for us at Sibsakar to be unable to lift our eyes without seeing the hills and thinking of the people who have no knowledge of Christ." Together with the help of his local Assamese evangelist named Godula, Dr. Clark began to befriend the Nagas and lay down a strategy for spreading the gospel among them. This opportunity would come in November 1872, when Godula came back from a trip to the village with some villagers who were eager to embrace this new faith. Dr. Clark baptized 9 of them in the Diku River near Sibsagar. A few days later, he made the historic journey up the hills. On his way, he stayed the night with Colonel Buckingham, a British tea garden manager residing in Amguri, which was the gateway to the Naga Hills. Dr. Clark arrived at the village of Deka Haimong on December 18, 1872. He remained there for 1 week, and during that time he baptized another 15 people who came to the Lord. This would become the foundation of the first church in Nagaland. Under the discipleship of Dr. Clark and Godula, the new church continued to grow but received increasing opposition and hostility from those in the village who clung to the traditional beliefs. Finally, in 1876, amid growing persecution, Dr. Clark and his small band of Naga believers set out from Deka Haimong village into the jungle. After some hours of tedious journey, they arrived at a forest crest and here founded a new village which they named Molung. The new village was founded on the 24th of October, 1876, and became the first Christian village in Nagaland and also the first mission center of the American Baptist Foreign Mission Society. Dubbed the cradle of education for the Nagas, Molungyimsen was also the village where formal education was first introduced to Nagaland. The first formal school in the Naga Hills was established here by Mary Mead Clark within a few months of her arrival at Molungyimsen, and by 1878 there were 30 students in the boys' school and 12 students in the girls' school. Molungyimsen was also the site of the first printing press in Nagaland, which in 1883 printed the first 4 books ever published in Nagaland. Dr. Clark also transcribed the Ao language into a written script and created an Ao dictionary, as previously Ao was only a spoken language. Literacy and education spread out from here to the rest of the region. After 21 successful years of missionary labor at Molungyimsen, Dr. and Mrs. Clark moved to Impur on the 24th of April, 1897. Impur was identified as the ideal center from which to prosecute work in the Ao tribe, and also from which to reach some tribes beyond the border. In Molangamson today, there is a large and old tree that sits at the top of the village. This is the lychee tree that was planted by Dr. Clark in 1878, and is the oldest lychee tree in Nagaland, and one of the oldest in the world. It still produces fruit to this day, and stands as the living witness of the American Baptist Foreign Society's mission work in Nagaland. Next to the lychee tree is the Clark Light Tower. It was erected in memory and honor of Dr. Clark on the spot where his house was situated. Within the tower are several rooms, one of which is a museum housing various artifacts and memorabilia from the time of Dr. Clark and his wife. The Dr. Clark Memorial Building in Molangamson was constructed in 1960 by the Council of Baptist Churches in Northeast India. It was located in the same compound in which the Clark Light Tower was constructed, but it is no longer standing today. Another historical feature that is still in existence today is the freshwater pool that was first used as the source of water for the village. This was the first well that was built by Dr. Clark and the villagers of Molungyimsen village when they first arrived. As the closest source of drinking water to the village, it had a very high importance to Dr. Clark and the early settlers of the village. It was used to sustain their daily needs, and when the population increased, they built more wells. Even so, Dr. Clark and his wife, Mary Mead Clark, continued to use this well, and they named it Longzubu, which means stone well in the Ao language. It is also known as Clark Zubu. Today, it is well regarded and valued as a symbolic heritage landmark. The well is located just below Dr. Clark's compound. There is another pool on the side of the hill. This is the pool in which Dr. Clark performed the baptisms of the early Christian converts in Molungyimsen and Nagaland. The baptism pool, located some few kilometers from the village, was dedicated in 1878 by Dr. Clark. Missionaries over the ages have baptized numerous Christians in this pool, with villagers from surrounding villages also being baptized here. The pool continues to be used today, and the historical significance it has to the people of Nagaland is akin to that which the Jordan River has to the people of Israel. This is the narrow suspension bridge that crosses the Milak River 14 kilometers from the village. The Clark Suspension Bridge, as it is known, was originally built in 1888 and is the oldest suspension bridge in Nagaland. Built by Dr. Clark using iron and materials shipped over from Boston, it helped to better connect the villages in the Naga Hills to the plains of Assam by reducing the time it took to travel. The trail that passes through this bridge is called the Gospel Road or the Peace Road. Much of what we know from Dr. and Mrs. Clark's early years and ministry in Nagaland comes from their private letters, personal diaries, mission update letters, and their updates from the Baptist Missionary magazine. Molangamson was founded as a Christian village so that the believers facing persecution because of their belief in Jesus Christ could freely practice their faith. On this, Dr. Clark wrote, "One new church has been formed. It is in the village where the first baptisms were performed in the Naga Hills. It was because the Christians were persecuted so much in this Dekahaimong village that they were induced to form a new village, Molong." In a separate report on the founding of the first Christian village, Dr. Clark wrote, "The Christians of Dekahaimong, with the missionary, moved a few miles westward to a vacant mountain crest and founded the village of Molong on the 24th of October, 1876. Here, in all the ages, was the first Naga village to hold Christ as king. All praise to his name." Years later, Dr. Clark wrote in a letter, "Molong village is now very largely Christian. That is, the Christian element much predominates. It is a fairly good ideal Christian village, for the first in the tribe out of heathenism. Of such a model there was a great want to show heathen villages what Christianity demands, and what it can produce, for the gospel versus the old faith is becoming one of the live questions among the people." The church at Molungyimsen flourished, and Dr. Clark's vision of a village that modeled Christian values and gospel living was realized. As the church thrived and the congregation grew, the Clarks sent numerous glowing reports back home. One of them, penned by Mrs. Clark, reads, Samar has been for some years pastor of the church at Molong village, the first church organized in all that mountain region. On a visit of Dr. Clark to that village, several were baptized, the communion administered, and every member, upwards of 100, was present. This, as it turned out, would be the beginning of the end for headhunting, inter-village warfare, and the senseless and brutal killing that had prevailed among the Nagas for centuries. Nagaland would certainly not have been the Christian state that it is today without the tireless and faithful work of Dr. Clark, his wife, and all those that partnered in the Naga mission that spread from the village of Molungyimsen. The descendants of Molangamson have tasted God's faithfulness and mercies for 150 years. 150 years ago, the American Baptist Foreign Mission Society invested in the Naga people by sending Reverend Dr. Edward Winter Clark and Mary Mead Clark to the Naga Hills. Molungyimsen Baptist Church is a living testimony of the faith, hope, and sacrifices of the Clarks and the Christians in the United States who gave generously for the Naga mission. Molungyimsen Baptist Church, on its 150th birthday, give thanks to God for their sacrifices. As Baptist Christians in Nagaland celebrate 150 years of God's faithfulness, we pray that the Lord bless you and keep you, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you, the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.